Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician. I've got something interesting to discuss with you today. But before we get to that, I want to do something real quick. I know since you're not here, we'll have you do a little bit of a selection. If you were here, I'd have you just shuffle the cards. Um, make sure that everything's absolutely mixed up. And this is real simple. I just say stop. Just say stop whenever you want as I drop the cards right there. Okay, and we'll take the last one here. And I want to talk to you tonight about what I really do believe is just the best method. And I want to talk about this as the best method because I think it's often overlooked or short-sold as the best method available. And this is based on a few recent videos I've done and some other things I've seen other people post talking about similar ideas lately. And this is the concept of pre-show. And as soon as I say that, some of you probably will turn this video off and go somewhere else. But I do really want to lean in on this. I had a video up recently, I think I titled it The Last Crusade, and I was talking about what objectively, and I gave explanations for my objectivity, why I objectively believe that the pre-show method for something like any card to any number, the Bergloss effect specifically, is the high bar for methods as compared to some other methods that use maybe a gimmick deck or more complicated procedure in the moment of the presentation of the effect, manipulation that's happening either in the open or unseen, but is happening in the within the constraints of the presentation of the effect itself. I find pre-show to be the best method, and when I say that, my fear is that some people equate pre-show with confederacy or the use of a stooge, such that if you were to consult participants in an effect ahead of the show and solicit information from them or feed them information, and then use them in the show later on, that you are essentially using stooges, that you are using confederates, that they're in on the trick with you, and there is, I think, a false understanding or an inaccurate understanding, a misconception about what pre-show really is, and it is not that. That's not what pre-show really is. And I was kind of racking my brain about this. What is pre-show? Like, what is a good analogy for it? And I think a really good analogy for pre-show work is escaping from prison via the laundry truck. Okay? So escaping from prison via the laundry truck. You've heard all these stories about prison escapes, some true, some not true, some fictitious, some exaggerated. There's stories about someone dressing up as a prison guard and walking out the front door, or dressing up as a visiting civilian or an attorney or something like that, and just kind of going out the front. There's other stories about the prison break where someone slowly over the course of months uses the back end of a spoon to chip away at concrete, and they create a tunnel hidden, under the bunk or something like that. All these really crazy stories about prison breaks, right? But there's this one kind of scenario that you see in movies or whatever, and that's escaping on the laundry truck. So someone is at the prison and they're doing service, and they're contracted to be there. And, someone escapes by hitching a ride on the vehicle as it leaves. They somehow make their way to it, and by those means they make an escape. And the other analogy I was kind of thinking about was the old joke about someone stealing. someone's working at a warehouse, and every day the boss notices that they, for the last few months, they've been taking a wheelbarrow out filled with straw, right? Hay filled right up, and they're taking this out. And they really get wise after a while. And one day they stop them and figure they've caught them red-handed. And they, pull all the straw off, and they see that there's nothing there. And they're allowed to go on their way. But they know something's wrong. They can see that the bottom line on the inventory is going down. There's a loss somewhere, but they cannot figure it out. Only to realize months later that they were stealing wheelbarrows, right? I kind of thought of that analogy, but it doesn't quite work for pre-show. This prison break on the laundry truck, though, is a perfect, I think, example of what pre-show really is. Now, let me explain this. What's happening in this scenario is that the criminal is escaping prison with the help of somebody who has no idea that they are helping. In fact, when the whole thing is over, they don't know that they've helped, right? So, for example, you could have a news flash, a breaking news segment, right, on the evening news. There's been a prison break at the local federal penitentiary, and 4 people have gone missing. And it's a complete mystery, and nobody knows what has happened. And, watching the news that night is the guy that contracts the laundry there, and he's watching this at home and eating his TV dinner and sitting with his family, and he goes, wow, that's incredible. I work there. Boy, that just rubs me uneasy, that security could be so lax there. Just completely flabbergasted that there's been a prison break at this institution where he was visiting earlier in the day. See, completely oblivious, along with everybody else, as to what has actually happened. That is what pre-show actually is. There is no loss in effect on anybody when pre-show is done properly. The people who are involved in the pre-show activity, ahead of the effect, ahead of the presentation, and those of you that do professional work and who have used this, professional mentalists out there, you understand what I'm getting at. I can't speak to those kinds of scenarios and the details related to pre-show in that context, because I don't do that. But you can, I think, appreciate and maybe speak to this point that the people who are in on the pre-show are not in on the trick. To them, the effect still holds up. However, there's a slight caveat here. For those people, there is an alternate reality. There's a dual reality going on, in that the way that they experience the effect is slightly different than the way that the rest of the audience experiences the effect. So there's a slight difference in the way the experience plays out for people that are part of the pre-show, and that doesn't take away from the effect at all. It just means that their perspective is from a slightly different angle than everybody else, but they don't even know it, and there's no way that they could know it. Now, why would I talk about this as the common magician who doesn't do mentalist routines and certainly doesn't do pre-show in the classic sense? Well, I argue that any kind of force or any kind of solicitation of information ahead of the effect that you're presenting is pre-show, right? I mean, you just take this moment for this situation. I started the video, I said, I got to do something first. I just need you to, mix up the cards real quick, but I just want you to pick something at random, say stop, and you pick a card, right? And the end result is this. It's a dead-on match from, a normal deck of cards. And the reason why this works is because it is a force, but the presentation, the type of force that it is, the way that the force is used, is done in such a way that it's a throwaway moment to the spectator, maybe not to you as magicians out there who follow me and follow other, magicians and have learned these methods, To you, this doesn't seem random or fair, perhaps, but to a regular spectator, someone who's participating in an effect, this seems completely random and fair, right? They might as well have named a card because everything was shuffled. They shuffled, they called stop when they wanted to as I was dropping the cards, and then there it was. It's just a key card, which you can make you can make a short or corner short, edge short, or a double thick card or anything like that that you can get to, or you can hold a break. You can call it, put it there, hold a break, and do a dribble stop as a force, or any force, any kind of force. It doesn't have to be as sophisticated as this. It really could be any kind of force where information is pushed onto the spectator ahead of what is presumed to be the actual presentation. Anytime you're doing that, you're really doing pre-show. You're doing in-show, pre-show, right? You're doing something that is ahead, especially if you present it in that way. You say, before we start, in fact, there's a book written by, I think Ossie Wynn wrote a book, Before We Begin, because that's the common line that is used in pre-show interactions, right? Look, before we do anything, let's do this real quick. And you get your information. You've actually gotten so far ahead, you don't really need to do anything after that. You have your forced information. The rest of it plays out easily. There's really nothing to worry about. There's no sleight of hand to do. There's no management that needs to be done. It's just pure storytelling and presentation and interaction with your spectators. And I find this to be the absolute highest bar of magic. I don't think the goal really should be to, and I've said this before, I don't think the goal for us really ought to ever be to eliminate forces. I think the goal should be to use what forces we have in the most innocent way, and in the most undetectable way, and in the most separated way from the effect. When we're using forces for preliminary information. Obviously, you can use forces as revelations. Another thing I like to do is to use forces in a revelation. When you use a force as a revelation and it gives the spectator the presumption that they've made the choice in that moment, in that procedural force, that is extremely powerful magic. And I don't think enough magicians use forces in that way. We usually use forces for the preliminary part. But if you divorce the preliminary part properly, and you set it apart enough, and you make it as inconsequential as possible, you've got yourself a really, really solid presentation, really, really solid effect, where the moment of force really doesn't, it's not even thought about. Nobody thinks about the selection process that happened a while ago. And this can also work very well for situations of dual reality where you're doing a presentation that is going to be video recorded. I've talked about this before. And you're able to do that forcing procedure before the camera starts. And one trick that I like to do when I've done this before is I'm working with someone and I'll say, look, before we begin, let's just make a random selection. You do that part. And then you say, you're going to want to turn the camera on for this. You'll want to see what happens. They turn on the camera. They get to have the video at the end that they can show to somebody else, and you hope that they will. You can even tell them, hey, make sure that you post that to your social media later on, right? Whenever before you have them roll or after you're done. But you've already gotten ahead. You've done your pre-show. And for them, as stated at the beginning of this conversation, the effect is the same. However, for anybody that watches the video later, the effect has a different perspective, which for most magicians who know how a force can work and can play in pushing information, when they look at that, it looks super duper clean. It looks really, really clean. It will take on the essence of thought of information that's freely provided. And this gets me back to that any card at any number conversation. That's why I think that this is the best. The Holy Grail is the one that nobody wants to do. And I don't get it, right? The one that nobody wants to do, I think really is the finest way to do it. And I strongly recommend pre-show as a tool in your tool chest, something that you turn to for your magic, particularly if you're going to have someone record it. I mean, you can use that gag of pre-show forces to record almost any effect that you can think about, and it will get you miles ahead, no matter really what the outcome of the effect is supposed to be. I just strongly recommend that as a goal. One thing that brought this up was someone ranted on the channel. I left it on there on one of my previous videos, talking. I think it's on the comprehensive any car to any number video from years ago. Very hot video, lots of views on that one. And someone made some weird comment, as if they knew what they were talking about. Said, well, David Berglas, he only ever did this one time on TV, and there's a reason why he only ever did it one time on TV. We all need to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. And I said, I don't know what in the world you're talking about. This was a normal effect that was a long-standing part of his presentations for people in person and on the media at the time, and for individuals. And there's a lot of individual accounts that people had about that effect. And obviously he had a method. I don't know what his methods were. In spite having a conversation with him one time, I don't know really anything that he ever did to accomplish that, other than what he shared in his Berglas Effects book that if you're lucky to get a hand on a copy of that, you can read that. But I explained to this individual that they had no idea what they're talking about. There's many instances of him doing the effect even at very old age, where it's just totally clean. Someone names a number, someone names a card, someone else deals, he never goes anywhere near it. I think Conjuring Community actually did a video on this a couple years ago, and they show, I think they showed at least 2 recorded examples of him pulling that off. And I've seen more than that. It's not stuff that's televised, on TV, but stuff that was part of the materials for the Berglas Effects book and video series that came with that. And then some other places where you can find it too. And obviously there's a method. And I think, he's probably going for one of these high bar methods. And it isn't a stooge. It's not a stooge. It's not a Confederate. That's why he can say that. Nobody's in on it that knows the code for the stacked deck. That's not what's going on there. There are other ways to get to that exact same end, and they're really, I think, straightforward. I wouldn't say easy, but certainly accessible and straightforward ways to get there. And pre-show is one of those ways. Highly recommend it. Hopefully I've got you thinking a little bit about this topic, and I'm hoping I softened it for some of you that maybe have looked kind of down your nose at the idea of pre-show before. But man, super strong. It's really the lifeblood of most mentalist acts. If you see something absolutely incredible, information that the mentalist is naming that they could not have known, it is involved. Pre-show is involved in some way. Either the spectators gave up that information at some time ahead, and they in the state don't connect the dots and have been made because of the type of pre-show and the procedure that was involved there. They can't connect the dots. They can't put the puzzle pieces together, and the effect still holds up even for them in that moment. It's the lifeblood of these faith healer charlatans that are out there. Is essentially all pre-show, where they solicit the information ahead, and then in a situation where they're not getting information from anybody, they're calling out intimate details that people feel or believe are secret, but really they have shared it openly in pre-show with somebody who's getting the information to the performer, and they're amazed by it, and everybody's amazed by it, and the dual reality stands up there. Nobody's in on it. No Confederates, no stooges. You're not really giving up the trick for somebody. Pre-show. I stand by it. Top shelf method. Consider it. Happy magicking.